It hurts me that my faith is being used to perpetuate these ugly acts. It hurts me that the face of my faith has been presented as something hateful and ugly when I know that there is a lot of beauty in it. And it hurts me that not enough people are speaking out. This is what is the biggest challenge, is that people are not speaking out. And why are they not speaking out? Because they've been told that you'll be called a bigot, you'll be called a racist. And I want them to understand by reading my book that if they criticize the issues that I have talked about, they are not being bigoted, they are not being racist. Of course, we have to be careful about the language that we use. This is not a backlash situation. But yes, everybody should be free to criticize those acts that are against humanity, because humanity is the most important thing. Religion is dogma.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of the Marty Heiser Show. Events are galloping along you can't believe. The dominant event that happened was last Wednesday at Washington, D.C. There was a large rally for Donald Trump, followed by a parade of people that went up to the Capitol and were peacefully protesting outside. And then many Trump supporters and others pierced the Capitol. Violence ensued, ransacking ensued. It's something that hasn't been seen in our Capitol since the Canadians. Yes, Raheel Raza, the Canadians in the War of 1812 came back and ransacked the Capitol and the White House. So it was a historic day. What does this mean? What does this mean internationally? What does this mean for the future of the Republican Party? Is Donald Trump out and on the ash heap of history, or is he somehow emboldened and empowered by this? We're going to be talking about this. The show last week, so I played some video of interviews that we did with people that were attending the rally, unbeknownst to us that it would later spill into what some have called the storming of the Capitol. We're trying here to build bridges, to bring harmony back to a very fractured world. We have a representative from Holland who's going to be joining us to give us a European perspective of this, as well as Jeffrey Morris, a beloved member of the Ridgefield community and well-known publisher. And he has some incredible insights on a personal level, as well as his thoughts on the future of the Republican Party. We'll also be looking at censorship. What does that mean? There's a lot of ground to cover. But to start, we are so thrilled to have the extraordinary author of this book, The ABCs of Islamism, not to be confused with Islam, and she'll get into that more. But Raheel Raza, I mean, the bio on her is just incredible. She's appeared on TV in numerous places, CNN, Real Time with Bill Maher. You have to see her interview with Bill Maher. It's just fantastic. BBC, CBS, CTV, TVO, and Fox News. Some of those are Canadian networks. She is a recipient of the Museum of Tolerance Medal of Valor in 2018, recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for Service in Canada. She's given testimony at the U.S. Congress on topics of combating homegrown terrorism. She has spoken at Harvard, Columbia, Brandeis University, Oxford, and Cambridge. She's addressed the parliaments of Sweden, the UK, Israel, Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C., and she has probably one of the most interesting TED Talks you'll see. She enjoys long walks on the beach with her beloved husband of, these many years. Interesting marriage because she's Shiite and he's Sunni. Raheel Raza, thank you so much for joining us. Before we go to you, and there she is in living color, but can we just play that intro video of her just to give you an idea of a little bit of her background and her new book, The ABCs of Islamism.
Do you think ISIS sprang out of nowhere? Do you think that the stabbing over London Bridge or the beheading in France was just an incident? Do you think 9/11 was something somebody did? No, they're all parts of a play produced and directed by the Muslim Brotherhood with the West as their stage. For many years, I've written and spoken out about Islamism, the political ideology that Western politicians refuse to acknowledge due to political correctness.
Raheel, thank you so much for joining us again. We really appreciate it. I got your book. I devoured it in 48 hours. It's incredibly readable with the title of the ABCs. You take it literally A, B, C, and then all through the alphabet, different topics related to Islam, but more to the point, Islamism. What's the difference of that? And by the way, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, and Happy New Year. I should
Happy New Year
mention
too.
perhaps after your poke at Canada that I'm a very proud Canadian, but it's a delight to be with you. You know that for the last 2 decades, and I've been on your show before to talk about this, I have been trying to expose this ideology that we call Islamism. Islam is a faith like Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, other faiths. It's actually the youngest of the monotheistic religions. Islamism, on the other hand, is a political ideology which uses Islam as a tool to promote its subversive agenda. It's a virus. It's like communism, fascism, Marxism. But, you know, when these existed in the world leaders spoke out. Unfortunately, in the case of Islamism, everyone is quiet because of political correctness, because they are scared of being called Islamophobes. And so I put together this book so people could understand the difference and also what a danger this ideology is to Western society, to our democracies, to gender equality, to freedoms, to everything that we hold near and dear to us.
You know, my two of my three kids, this is a little too much information, but they have tattoos on their body of a good friend of mine named Bo Costas. He was he came over here to actually had a Division I college basketball scholarship. He played basketball and he worked for Cantor Fitzgerald. And on 9/11 in the North Tower of the World Trade Center, that was his last day. He was sort of an adopted member of our family. Our kids are just terribly, miss him. It was devastating. At that point, I decided I was going to try to do a study of Islam and Islamism to basically answer the question, why are they so angry? What did we do wrong to them? And I'll tell you one thing, and this is the utmost respect I have for you, is you take on these issues from the Quran, from abuse of women, from the history of Islam, and you show no fear whatsoever. Under F in your book for fatwa, you talk about how there's been a fatwa put out on your life based on this book and other writings that you've had. How do you deal with that? I mean, to me, it seems like you have, I don't know, the courage of Hercules.
Well, I deal with it, Marty, because somebody has to deal with it. And it's better coming from a practicing observant Muslim, which I am, because this is something that needs to be dealt with. So there are two circles we're looking at. One is the work that has to be done internally within Islam by Muslims to bring about the reform and changes that are much needed and look at the theology and try and put aside the historical context. And the second has to be done by everybody, by every citizen, by every leader. And that is something that I'm struggling with because I'm not seeing that happen. Now, right now, the world focus is on, of course, America, what is happening there. And for the last 6 months or so, people haven't been focused on this issue of the Islamist ideology, but it hasn't gone away. The Islamists, in fact, are delighted that these things are happening because they are the ones who take strength from Antifa, they take strength from the extreme left. They are delighted when there is a muzzling of freedom of speech, the cancel culture. All of this plays right into the hands of the Islamists without any effort. And they may not be any overt terrorist attacks right now, but the work of the Islamists is from within. And it wasn't so long ago that we saw the beheading in France. You know, there was a hue and cry for a while, and Macron was one of three people who spoke out and said that we have to do something about this Islamist ideology, about the teaching, about the curriculums. But the rest of the world leaders were silent on this. So it's something that had to be addressed. And I decided to put it together in an easy to read book, again, in alphabetical order, so that if somebody wants to know about blasphemy, for example, the blasphemy laws, and they think, oh, this is part of the Quran and this is Islam, they read it and understand that no, it has a historical context and it is political. So much of Islamism is a political ideology that wants to devalue and derange the values of the Western world. And it is based on the mandate of the Muslim Brotherhood, which, don't take my words for it, it is their own manifesto, which said that the West is evil. We need to infiltrate them from within and weaken them from inside by using their own policies.
Interesting. On the fatwa, you say on page 50, I knew that sooner or later some religious crank would find me, but still I was surprised when I saw the email fatwa with my name on it. Is that how you get a fatwa? It's actually emailed to you?
Well, originally it used to be the mullah giving the fatwa in public so that people could hear it and then damn the person who the fatwa was on. But of course, today in the days of the internet, it came as an email. I was just so surprised. I mean, in one way, I thought it was hilarious. But yes, now they have direct fatwa.
Well, I mean, but in 1989, Salman Rushdie wrote the book Satanic Verse, and he had a fatwa, and it seemed like he lived in fear for the rest of his life. But this is your attitude on page 50. I'm no stranger to hostility. I've been pepper sprayed, received crank calls and hate mail. My husband has been taken aside and asked, why do you allow his wife so much freedom to speak out? At various times, people have suggested that I write under a pseudonym or change my name entirely. But I give Canada credit for giving me courage to live freely, speak my mind, and celebrate the way I choose. Only when I came here did I find freedom and confidence as a Muslim woman to study and understand my faith. Islam does not bind me, but frees me to pursue knowledge and strengthen my spirituality regardless of my gender. By the way, if I didn't mention it, Raheel is calling in from just outside of Toronto, and she is a practicing Muslim. So when she talks about Islamophobia, when she talks about fatwas, when she talks about misinterpreting the Quran, she's on pretty solid ground.
Thank you, Marty. These are all important things. You missed the death threat. I should have put it down under D for death threat, but I thought it would scare people off too much. But the fact is that I believe that what I say is validated, it's credible, it's the truth. Now, people don't obviously like much of it, those who think that I'm a thorn in their side, but it has to be said, and it has to be said loud and clear. Why? Because our politicians who sell their souls for votes and our leaders who are afraid to address the issue of the Islamist ideology of radicalization need to be given a wake-up call to say that if they are criticizing terrorism, extremism, radicalization, they are not criticizing Islam. This is the important differentiation. We have to stand up and speak about those issues that are against human rights. And much of what Islamists follow is against human rights. They oppress women, they oppress gays, they promote violence, they like to divide and rule. And what most people don't know, that Muslims like me, reformist Muslims, outspoken Muslims, modern Muslims, have been the target of Islamists more than any non-Muslims. So we are living in fear of our lives because they can put a label of apostasy, blasphemy at any time, and you become a walking target.
Yeah, I mean, when you say they, the they you're referring to is this radical Islamism, as opposed to Islam, historic Islam, which gets along and actually embraces what I found, some things I found fascinating in your book. One of which is the commonality between the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition, and the Islamic tradition. And you point out, and this is a shocker for anyone that looks into comparative religions, but actually Jesus is referred to more in the Quran than Muhammad. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. More times by name in the Quran. In fact, there is an entire chapter in the Quran called Maryam, which is Mary, which speaks about the birth of Jesus. And he is mentioned more times by name in the Quran than Muhammad. Now, in all this frenzy of extremism and terrorism and the focus on that, we seem to have sidelined the spiritual connection between the Abrahamic faiths. And I've said this in my book, and I often say that Islam, being the youngest of the three monotheistic faiths, spiritually is Judaism type. There is so much that is taken from Judaism and Christianity in Islam. If only we were to take the time to sit and have dialogue. But do we have dialogue? No. We don't talk to each other. We don't talk about these things because people are afraid that if we do, then an honest dialogue means that we have to address the negative aspects as well. We have to address the issues of gender inequality, of Sharia laws, everything that I've mentioned in my book. So I want this book to be a point of discussion. I want this book to become a way that we can talk to each other. I want people to question and say, why did you say this? Because this is an opportunity for us to have an honest dialogue, which is imperative in these days. When people are so focused on everything that they think that the Islamists have somehow gone away. They haven't. They are strengthened every day by what they see happening in the West. And so we have to be cognizant of the fact that they exist, and that at any opportunity, like we saw in France, they will find a way to attack Western freedoms, Western values, Western small and liberal values, women. And that is one of my biggest concerns. I'm an activist for women's rights. And I work very hard to show that the Islamists want to silence women. And so the fact that I happen to be female is a big thorn in their side.
No, you're a female. You're a Muslim. I love the idea that you're Shia and your husband's Sunni, or you're
The other
Sunni.
way around.
The other way around.
Yes.
And
yes.
happily married for years and years.
43
And
years.
all of this is just an anathema in some very intense, extreme Islamic city or countries that you talk about. You talk about 9/11 on page 100. You said, meanwhile, the extremist and fundamentalist ideology behind the terrorist attack on 9/11 is alive and well and rapidly spreading even more today. And then you talk about how we should be free to critique Islam the same way that we critique Christianity. Only people have rights, but they don't have the right to shut down discussion of topics that they find uncomfortable.
I'm very concerned about the muzzling of free speech, Marty. The cancel culture, the loss of our freedoms, because one of the reasons my family and I came to the West, came to Canada 30 years ago, was to embrace the fact that there is freedom of speech, that, we have liberal values, we have a democracy, and that we can say what we want. And when more and more, when I see this cancel culture, when I see political correctness, it really tears me apart, because that stops us from having an honest conversation. And this is a war of ideas. The whole Islamist ideology, it's not a war of weapons, it's a war of ideas. And we have better ideas, but we need to interchange those ideas. In your opening, you talked about peace and harmony. How can we have peace and harmony if we are not able to address the core issues that are breaking our peace and harmony? We need to have honest dialogue, a dialogue of equals. And that's something that I don't see happening at a large scale. It is happening in small groups, in pockets, but it's not happening from the top down. And we do need to address that issue.
I want to go through just kind of down some on pages 64 and following. You talk about honor killings. You talk about feminine or female genital mutilation. You talk about that this has happened to 125 million women across the country. Talk a little bit about that, the dehumanizing and the subjective role that women play in some of these Islamic cultures.
Well, yes, in Muslim majority societies, there is much more of this honor killing culture than there is. But of course, it's been now imported into the West. So we see this happening in the United States, in Canada, UK, Europe. And Europe, of course, is a hotbed of Islamism. I mean, when I look and see what is happening there, it is, I don't know if it can even be controlled anymore, because there's an entire new generation of young people who have been brought up on a menu of Islamist values. And so we see suicide bombings, we see the problems related to women's rights. And honor killings, female genital mutilation, forced and underage marriage, all of these were part of a documentary called Honor Diaries, which I think you had talked about at some point. But they have not minimized in number. In fact, they have gone underground and they keep growing in numbers. Every week I read of another honor killing in a Western country. So obviously there is something at play here. The Islamists want to subdue women. They don't want women to live by Western values. And they use violence as a means to silence women. And this is something that is totally unacceptable.
And the real insidious thing, it will be a member of their family, a brother, a father, an uncle. You say on page 66, according to the United Nations report, 4,000 women were killed in Pakistan in the name of honor between 1998 and 2003. In a study, female deaths in Alexandria, Egypt, 40% of the women were killed by a relative after the woman had been raped, which is considered shame on the family. In Jordan and Lebanon, 70 to 75% of the perpetrators of so-called honor murders are the women's brothers.
Yes.
There was a case of this. Well, you talk about the case in Canada where it was like 3 daughters,
yes,
and the man's first, and they were drowned. And then there was also a case in Houston, Texas, where a father ran over his daughter because she had become too westernized.
Yes. Yes, a couple of the cases that you have mentioned. There have been more. The numbers are too high for our comfort zone. And this is a specific of honor killings. So let me tell you where the problem lies. Very often law enforcement want to just shove this under the headline of domestic violence. It is very different. We have tried for years in many countries, including Sweden, to have honor killings listed as a separate criminal offense because it is done with intention. Family members are involved, and it has these specific characteristics which identifies it as being an honor killing. Very often the family admitting they did it for the sake of the honor of the family, the honor of the tribe, the honor of the village. And they do it with impunity and they do it with pride. Now in Jordan, for the longest time, there has been a law that says that if a man murders a family member for the sake of honor, he will not be prosecuted. So when you have laws like that, or when you have countries where the law does not punish the perpetrator, because if the family forgives the murderer, then they get away with it. So the laws have to be changed. These have been embedded for hundreds of years, and women are always the victim. Women are the ones who suffer from this. So there has to be education. There has to be understanding. There has to be something done in the legal system. Law enforcement need to understand that an honor killing is something that is done intentionally. It's not an accident. It's not done out of, passion or anger. It is planned, and usually it is planned with the family members, and very unfortunately, sometimes even the women of the family either collude or are forced to collude.
It's interesting because you come from this perspective as a Muslim, you're raised in Pakistan, raised in a Muslim family. We've had it in this TV show we've had a number of different imams come on after a Islamic terrorist attack, but then also in the same breath when Christchurch in New Zealand, they had an attacker that went in there, and we talked about some of these things. And one thing I pointed out, I brought actually a picture of it, was a burning cross, and this was the symbol of the Ku Klux Klan. And as a Christian, you say the Ku Klux Klan has absolutely nothing to do with the Christianity of the Bible, where we're taught to turn the other cheek, to love our neighbor, to support. And for them to usurp and take the symbols of our beloved religion and use it as violence against people with their skin color or what have you is an anathema. And my sense throughout your entire book, you come to that same thing. You're not attacking Muslims. You are a Muslim. You're not attacking Islam. You talk about the beauty of it and how it's brought things like algebra, how if you like hospitals, that was invented in the Muslim tradition. It's brought so much good to the world. It seems as if you are talking from inside, saying we've got to clean up our own house, in the same way that I respond so repulsively with anything having to do with the Ku Klux Klan, the least of which usurping a glorious symbol of Christianity, the death of Christ on the cross. I think that
You
is
nailed it.
the same way. But you can do it
Absolutely.
because you're a
I do
Muslim.
it because it hurts me. It hurts
Yeah.
me that my faith is being used to perpetuate these ugly acts. It hurts me that the face of my faith has been presented as something hateful and ugly when I know that there is a lot of beauty in it. And it hurts me that not enough people are speaking out. This is what is the biggest challenge, is that people are not speaking out. And why are they not speaking out? Because they've been told that you'll be called a bigot, you'll be called a racist. And I want them to understand by reading my book that if they criticize the issues that I have talked about, they are not being bigoted, they are not being racist. Of course, we have to be careful about the language that we use. This is not a backlash situation. But yes, everybody should be free to criticize those acts that are against humanity, because humanity is the most important thing. Religion is dogma. And when religion is used for political means and violent political means, it has to be stopped.
The book is called The ABCs of Islamism. It is a fascinating read. It's very well organized alphabetically, and I can't recommend it enough. Now, we are non commercial radio, so I can't say order before midnight tonight or go to this website. We can't do all that, but you're intelligent people. You know where to buy books. This is really a great read. And also, I'm sure you can find, download the documentary Honor Diaries. That is an award-winning documentary that is incredible as well. So, Raheel, thank you so much for joining us. As you know, I know you have other places to go, probably go lecture at Oxford or go over to Harvard and pick up an honorary degree. But we're gonna now bring our roundtable discussion, and some of what you talk about as far as counterculture, as far as cancel culture, censorship, things like that. We're going to be talking about in the roundtable. But thank you, and if you can stay, please do.
Thank you,
But
Marty.
we
I
really
really
appreciate it.
appreciate your having me. I'll quickly tell people that they can get my book on Amazon and read it and write a review if they can. That would be awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
This is Raheel Raza for Rebel News. Don't forget to click or like www.rebelnews.com, and also check out my new book at www.theabcsofIslamism.com.